Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today. Today we're going to be studying in 1 Kings chapters 13 and 14. If you'd like to get a piece of paper, and on one corner write Jeroboam, and underneath his name write wife, for Jeroboam's wife. On the top of the other corner, across from Jeroboam, write young prophet, and underneath write old prophet. And then right in the center, draw a question mark with a line underneath it. That'll become important when we get to the end of the story. You'll see. Today, we're in 1 Kings chapters 13 and 14. Last week, Jordan helped us see and understand some things about Rehoboam that were really tragic. We see the foolish and unwise decision he made that led to the dividing of a nation. David had built a powerful and strong nation. Solomon had expanded it. And now, Rehoboam at age 40 is going to make a tragic mistake. He seeks the counsel of some older men, and they advise him, if you reduce the taxes of the people, they'll follow you. But if you increase them, you'll divide the nation. The younger men tell him to increase the taxes, and Rehoboam listens to the younger men. And sure enough, the nation divides. 10 tribes go north. Jeroboam leads them north. And 2 tribes remain in the south and basically become Judah. God was going to keep two tribes in the south, especially Judah, because he made a promise to David he was going to fulfill. Well, Rehoboam doesn't like what's happened, and so he gets 180,000 of his men, and he's fixing to go to the north, and he's fixing to clean their clock and bring back his people. I mean, he's lost 10 tribes here. That's a lot of people. He's also lost a lot of money, because of the tax revenues, the income that would have come from the taxes those people would have paid. So Rehoboam is really kind of a hurtful way. God had told Jeroboam, if you live a godly life, I will establish a dynasty after you. But Jeroboam doesn't do that. God tells Rehoboam, you can't go fight these people. They're your brethren. See, God didn't like it when brethren fight. And then he says, this is of me. How's it of me? How can God say that? How can God say it's of me? Because he's the one that prophesied the nations would be divided, and Jeroboam would lead them to the north. Well, Jeroboam's a real smart fellow. And so he knows once he gets the tribes to the north, they may go south to keep the feast days, and they may be impressed with the beauty and the grandeur of the temple and how things are in Jerusalem versus how things are for them in the north, and they may want to stay. In fact, he says, it's too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. And so he puts an altar at Bethel and one at Dan. These are not just places he chose. They had significance historically. Bethel and Dan would have been a place where Abraham and Jacob would have had experience of worshiping God. So how could that be bad? Dan was a place that was set up as a place of worship during the time of the judges, and perhaps Moses' grandson served as a priest there. So how could that be bad? And then he does one other thing. It says on the 15th day of the 8th month, he sets up a feast like the one at Judah. How is it like it? Because the one at Judah was the 15th day of the 7th month. So he's 1 month off. But hey, what's 1 month to these people? Well, a young prophet comes. He catches Jeroboam worshiping idols. Look at verse 1 of chapter 13. A man of God went from Judah to Bethel by the word of the Lord, and Jeroboam stood by the altar to burn incense. I mean, here's Jeroboam right here worshiping the idols that he's built. And this young man comes and sees that and says, you shouldn't be doing that. That's not the right thing to do. In fact, here's what's going to happen. These idols that you built, they're going to be destroyed by a man named Josiah. Now, the interesting thing is Josiah is 300 years in the future. And he says, Jeroboam, everything you built here, Josiah is going to tear it down. It's going to be burnt to crispy critters. The ashes are going to be poured out over all of it. Jeroboam didn't like that, so he takes his finger and he points it at the man. And as he points his finger at him, his finger freezes and withers. You can't pull it back. Well, that ought to get your attention. And it does get Jeroboam's attention. And Jeroboam asks for the man, please restore my hand. And he does. Now, it seems like in these chapters there's a lot of judgment taking place here. And there is. But there's also a lot of grace taking place here. There's 6 different signs that Jeroboam will have. He'll have the sign of the paralyzed hand. He'll have the sign of truth, the torn altar. He'll have the sign of grace. His hand will be assaulted before their eyes and be restored. And then he'll have the sign of repudiation. God's going to reject him and reject all that he has. So there are signs being given here, even the sign of his son in chapter 14. God's trying to get Jeremiah's attention. He doesn't want to destroy him or the tribes that are following him. But Jeremiah's not having any of it. I mean, I keep saying Jeremiah. Jeroboam's not having any of it. The young prophet now leaves the presence of Jeroboam. Jeroboam asked him to stay and come to his house and eat. The young prophet said, by the commandment of God, I can't eat bread, can't drink water with you, and I have to go back a different way. By the commandment of the Lord. Here this young man recognized there was a path that was the commandment of the Lord. Last week, Jordan talked about 2 paths. Well, here's a path. The path to the commandment of God. Well, there's an old prophet at Bethel that hears about the young prophet, and he's going to do something about that. Now, notice the young prophet came from Judah to Bethel. There's an old prophet already at Bethel. Why does he have to call the young prophet? I don't know. My guess is, it's only a guess, maybe the old prophet had gotten used to living under Jeroboam and he liked it. He didn't want to rock the boat. And so the young prophet comes and he speaks to Jeroboam and tells him what's going to happen, and his hand withers and then he restores it. So the young man is going back home a different way, and the old prophet hears about it. He says, I want to talk to that young man. The old prophet may be stargazed by the young prophet. And so it says in chapter 13, it says in verse 18, he said to him, I too am a prophet as you are. An angel of the Lord spoke to me by the word of the Lord, saying, bring him back with you to your house, that he may eat bread and drink water. But he was lying. Wait a minute, prophets lying? I thought prophets were supposed to be truth tellers. I thought they were to tell the word of God forward. They were to teach the word of God. He's lying? Now, the young prophet doesn't know he's lying. But he knows the commandment of God. And so he still has a choice. And he makes a choice, another choice, to go to the home of the old prophet. And while he's there, in verse 21, he cried out to the man of God who came from Judah, saying, because you disobeyed the word of the Lord, have not kept the commandment which the Lord your God commanded you, but you came back, ate bread, drank water in the place which the Lord said to you, eat no bread, drink no water, your corpse shall not come to the tomb of your fathers. Because he listened to the voice of the old prophet, the Lord said, you're going to die, and you shall not share the tomb of your fathers. And so it says then in verse 24 of chapter 13, when he was gone, a lion met him on the road and killed him. His corpse was thrown on the road. The donkey stood by it. The lion also stood by the corpse. That's an amazing scene, isn't it? The lion and the donkey stand there. Why doesn't the lion devour the donkey? And why does the lion devour the body of the young prophet? It seems to me like God closed the mouth of the lion. He did in the time of Daniel, when Daniel was in the den of lions. The young prophet hears about it. The old prophet hears about what happened to the young prophet. And he says, go get his body. I'm going to bury him in my burial place. And then the old prophet tells his sons, when I die, I want to be buried next to the young prophet. What a tragic story that happened to the young prophet, but he didn't listen to the commandment of God. Then we come to chapter 14. And Jeroboam has a son, and he's sick. And so he tells his wife, you disguise yourself, you go talk to the prophet Ahijah, and you find out if our son is going to live. So she disguises herself, but Ahijah's blind. But when she walks in, he says, so why'd you come to see me? He knows who she is. Well, if she's disguised, and he's blind, and she walks to the door before she ever says anything, how does Ahijah know who she is? And God revealed it to him. He did no good to hide. You can't hide from God. You can't disguise yourself away from God. And so she says, I want to know, is my son going to die? And Ahijah says, well, when you go home and set your foot in the door, the minute you step your foot in the door, that boy's going to die. But that's a merciful death. It seems strange to say merciful death. But compared to what God says is going to happen to Jeroboam, look at what he says in chapter 14. And look at what he says in verse 11. Back in verse 9 it says, you have molded images to provoke me to anger and have cast me behind your back. Therefore, behold, I will bring disaster on the house of Jeroboam and every male of Israel, bond and free. The dog shall eat. Whoever belongs to Jeroboam and dies in the city, and the birds of the air shall eat whoever dies in the field, for the Lord has spoken. Arise, go to your feet. Get on your feet, the child. Arise, go to your own house. When your feet enter the city, the child shall die. And she goes back, and sure enough, when she sets her foot in the house, the child dies. But notice, it says in verse 17, then Jeroboam's wife arose and departed and came to Tirzah. When she came to the threshold of the house, the child died. And they buried him, and all Israel mourned according to the word of the Lord. Here's the child that suffers because of the sins of the father. And the child dies, but he's not devoured like Jeroboam. He doesn't experience what Jeroboam's going to experience in this. Again, a sign, an act of grace for Jeremiah to pay attention to. But you see, Jeremiah has already decided. I keep saying Jeremiah, I'm sorry. Jeroboam. Jeroboam's already decided. Jeroboam's already decided the path that he's going to take. I think there's some lessons for us here that are really significant. First of all, who are we going to listen to? Shouldn't we be able to trust the voice of older people? Well, we should. But sometimes older people don't tell younger people the truth. You know, it's really sad that older people would contribute to the downfall in some way of a young person. Young people don't necessarily know. No, the young prophet was inspired by God. The young people don't necessarily know what old people know because of experience and because of years of knowledge. But how sad when old people take advantage of young people and it contributes to the fall of young people. I think something else is significant here. As we said, how can you hide from God? Jonah learned he couldn't hide from God, didn't he? And Jeroboam's wife learned she can't disguise herself in such a way that God cannot see her. You know, we may disguise ourselves. Little children, 2-year-olds, when they cover their eyes like this, because they can't see you, they think you can't see them. Well, look, we can cover our eyes all we want to not see God, but God still sees us. He sees everything we do. He knows every thought we have. We're not going to hide from God. And I think something else is important. How are we going to be remembered? How are we going to be remembered? Are we going to be remembered like this old prophet who lied to the young prophet who didn't obey the command of God because it was believe the word of the old prophet? Are we going to be remembered like Jeroboam? Nothing positive is said of Jeroboam. In fact, it says in chapter 14, the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, he made war, how he reigned, are indeed written in the book of Chronicles. Everything Jeroboam built is going to be destroyed by Josiah in 300 years. The question is, how are we going to be remembered? How do we want to be remembered? If you turn to a little book that Jordan has put for us, I think in chapter 14, Jordan has some significant things to help us here. Notice it says, he chose the path of sin to do what he wanted to do. And this chapter, the prophet of God tells the wife of Jeroboam what punishments were soon to come because of the path he chose. Jeroboam chose the path of sin. And you know, every one of us also have We have a choice. We have a choice which path we're going to walk, don't we? Our decisions, as we see the decisions of Jeroboam and the decision of the young prophet, Jordan says in his little booklet, our decisions don't just affect us, they affect more than others. The path we take can be a blessing to people, or the path we take can be a curse to people. You see, we all have influence. How are we going to be remembered? Are we going to choose the path of obeying God? Are we going to choose the path of disobeying God and being destroyed like all of Jeroboam was there? You see, we get to choose the path. Rehoboam made the mistake and chose the wrong path, and Jeroboam did too. And the children of Israel that followed him became only more wicked. Assyria finally destroyed the children of Israel because of their idolatry. How sad a nation started out with such promise and ends in such destruction. How sad a prophecy was given that could have been so glorious, and because he's so wicked, it ends in such a terrible way to die. How sad it is that a young prophet was lied to by an old prophet. But how great it is when we obey the commandment of God. How great it is when we are remembered like Josiah, not like Jeroboam. Well, thanks for joining me today. Jordan will have the next lesson. Stay safe and stay healthy. I sure hope this was healthy or helpful to you. I sure hope this was helpful to you. Have a good day.